What is up, everybody? This is Chase, and welcome back to the Wellness Center podcast, where we are destigmatizing mental health one episode at a
Mm.
time. Everyone, I am so grateful that you are here with me today, tuning in to listen to another amazing story of recovery and resilience and skills and thriving and all of the wonderful things that we look for on this show. So I'm so grateful that you guys tuned in. If you're not already a part of the Wellness Center tribe, please make sure to smash that subscribe button and the notification button on YouTube so you can get updated on when we're dropping our weekly episodes so you can continue learning and gaining all of that hope. And if you're listening on one of the podcast platforms like Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Guys, our goal is 200 subscribers on Facebook or on YouTube. I apologize. As of right now, we're at about 180, so we only have 20 more to go. So please share it with 20 people so we can get all those subscriptions up. And by way of the podcast platforms, the goal is 10 5-star reviews. We're currently at 3, so we are working our way up there. So please be a part of the tribe. Please be a part of the family and the growth here by taking that small and simple step of leaving the review or subscribing. So guys, without further ado, I want to bring on my amazing guest, guys. This lady is truly phenomenal. I am so fortunate that she has taken some time out of her incredibly busy schedule to be on the Wellness Center channel today. So guys, some really cool information about her. So she has a master's degree in psychology and counseling. So you already know she's brilliant. She has over 30 years of private practice experience. She specializes in abuse and dysfunctional family dynamics. She's the author of America in Therapy, a new approach to hope and healing for a nation in crisis. And she's currently focused on writing and speaking in her career journey. So without further ado, we have got Phyllis Leavitt on the show. Phyllis, how are you doing today?
It's gonna be a fine day today. I can see. It's gonna be a fine day today. I can see. Gonna be a fine day today for you and me.
Oh, well, what a beautiful introduction. And thank you so much. I'm doing great. And I'm just really happy to be here talking with you.
Yeah, and I'm so grateful you're here. Thank you so much. And thank you for the kind words. This really is the highlight of my whole week is when I get to meet phenomenal people like you and hear your phenomenal stories. Yeah, so Phyllis, if you could just give us some cookie cutter answers as like who you are and what you're all about, that'd be great.
Yeah, well, I am obviously a psychotherapist and an author. I am happily married to a wonderful man. I have 3 grown children and 3 grandchildren. I live up in the mountains. I love nature. I love art. I love writing, of course. And I'm really at a really wonderful place in my life after, obviously I've had a journey. Um, and I wasn't always at this wonderful place in my life. And I'm very, very grateful to be here because I feel like some of my dreams have been fulfilled that I didn't ever think would be.
It's amazing. And I can imagine your journey has been so exciting and in all of the beautiful parts of a journey. It's funny, my mom is a new grandma, right? She's got 5 soon to be 6 grandkids, and they're all under 6 years old. And my mom constantly tells us, she's like, yeah, we had kids so we could have grandkids. Is that true for you as well?
Well, it's not why I had kids exactly. I'm really grateful that I have grandchildren because it is a very spectacular part of my life and something that I love and really appreciate and I'm grateful for. Yes.
That's amazing. How many grandkids do you have?
3.
Oh, that's right. You said that. I apologize,
Right.
but
No, that's okay.
what a rewarding experience. And congrats to everything you've been through and all of those journeys. So I'm curious, like I know, so I come from Utah and you mentioned that you live in the mountains. Are the mountains in New Mexico, are they like actual mountains, like Western mountains, or are they more kind of like rolling hills?
I guess you'd call them mountains where I live. They're not like 14ers or anything like that, but
Hmm.
they're definitely, you know, New Mexico where I live is very dry. It's deserty in general, but in
Hmm.
the mountains there's lots of trees and a very little bit of water.
Hmm.
Uh, and and very clean air. It's quite lovely up here. I mean, we live in the midst of trees.
Okay,
So,
nice.
yeah.
And do you guys deal with like winter at all there, or is it summer all year round?
Oh yeah, we have the four seasons here.
Oh,
We have snow in the winter. There's a lot of skiing up here in the mountains, um, and sledding, and all the winter sports people do up here. And our summers are really beautiful. Sometimes a little bit hot, but mostly, very tolerable. And of course, fall is outrageous. We have aspen trees here. We don't have all the colors of the East Coast, but
mhm.
the aspens turn gold and a little bit
Oh,
and they're just spectacular.
I could
So,
imagine that as a sight to behold.
yeah,
So, are you an avid skier or snowboarder?
I am not a skier. I have no sense of balance. I never have, but we love to hike. So, we hike and we spend a lot of time outdoors, garden, and just appreciate nature quite a bit.
Love it.
Camp, we like to camp also. So,
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, my family, we love camping as well. One of our favorite things when we're camping is hobo dinners, if you've ever had those before.
I'm not sure what that is.
It's where you get the tin foil and then you do like the meat, the potatoes, the carrots, wrap it up in tin
Oh,
foil and then put it on the fire.
oh, never done that. No.
Oh, I would highly suggest trying it now. It's so, so good, especially on the fire.
Yeah, everything on the fire is good, right?
Right. I agree with you. There's
Right.
like, and even hot, I'm sure we could talk about this for hours. My wife loves fire roasted hot dogs. They
Okay.
are so good.
You know what else is really good? Fire roasted corn. Really, really good.
Oh, my wife also loves corn. So this is, I'm gonna have to let her know. She's actually getting ready to go to the Wind Rivers backpacking, and I'm gonna tell her to bring like a single ear of corn so she can cook it over a
Totally.
fire. Cool.
Totally.
Well, Phyllis, and I'll stop taking us off a random camping tangent. Let's get into my question. So, Phyllis, take us back to a young Phyllis Leavitt. When were some
Yeah.
of the first, am I saying your last name right?
Yes, you are. You are.
Perfect. Yeah, take us back to a young Phyllis Leavitt. When were some of the first times that you struggled with your mental health?
Well, first of all, nobody talked about mental health when I was a child. So
Hmm.
I didn't even know what I was struggling with. I had no idea.
Hmm.
Um, I had some early childhood abuse that I had completely buried. And so it's so hard to describe because I can describe it in words now, but
Hmm.
I didn't have any words for what I was experiencing when I was a child because nobody even talked about feelings really.
Hmm.
We were just, I was in a kind of middle class family I grew up in New Jersey.
Hmm.
Um, my family was very educated and had a great emphasis on education, which I'm actually very grateful for
Hmm.
because I always love to learn and I still do. So that was a great thing. And
Hmm.
I had a lot of good things in my childhood. I had like I said, I love school, I love learning. We went to the library, we went to the beach. We had enough food. I had piano lessons. So it looked all really fine on the outside, but
Yeah.
it really wasn't fine on the inside. And again, I had no language for that. So I had buried what happened to me as a very young child. And I just felt like I didn't belong anywhere.
Hmm.
I felt like how did I get here even on this planet? I felt like such a stranger to the world and to other people. Felt like something was wrong with me and I didn't know what it was. And I thought it was all my fault. Like there's something wrong with me and I don't know how to fix it.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that's what abuse does to people, that whether you remember or not, there's a feeling of extreme alienation and otherness. And I would say my main symptoms, people have different symptoms
Yeah.
when they're as children. Mine were mostly shut down and probably a layer of depression and a certain amount of anxiety that I just carried with me because I always felt like I had to appear some way that looked acceptable when I didn't really feel that way on the inside.
Hmm.
And because I didn't know why, I just bumbled along through life, mostly trying to be a really good student.
Hmm.
Fortunately, that was okay for me, and I did well in school, and I went to college. And when I was in college, I don't even remember what happened, but I just remember feeling like I don't know how I'm going to go on.
Yeah.
Um, and I remember I flew home to my parents' house, and of course, they didn't really want me to be there. And I went back to school and um, limped through it all. And anyway, long story short, by the time I was in my mid 30s, I was married, had 3 children, very dysfunctional relationship because I was
Mhm.
dysfunctional. And of course, I picked someone who was dysfunctional. I mean, that's kind of how it works for a lot of people.
Right.
So it was not a happy marriage. And in fact, I think it just kind of culminated in me having, I guess you would say hitting bottom because I didn't drink, I didn't do anything like that, but I
Mhm.
so depressed and so lost that I finally went to therapy. And at that time in my life, people that I knew were starting to go to therapy. I mean, people didn't do that when I was young or even talk about it.
Yeah.
I went to therapy. And I began to understand that there was something that happened that set me up to feel the way that I did.
Mhm.
Um, and I took out books on psychology. I started reading. I went to many therapists. I started remembering what happened to me. And then I started to make sense to myself.
Mhm.
And I would say that it was not an easy journey. Um,
Yeah.
and I think one of the things that was really beautiful about it, though, is that I decided to become a therapist myself. I went back
Mhm.
to school, got my degree, and I worked with so many people that in some way were like me, that had very, very difficult things happen to them when they were
Mhm.
children. I realized I wasn't alone.
Mhm.
And then from there, I kind of realized well, let me back up and just say, because of my own experience, I felt like I could go anywhere somebody needed to go. I wasn't afraid of them tapping into their pain or their fear or their darkness or their self-criticism
Mhm.
uh, or their hopelessness. I wasn't afraid of that because I had experienced it all. And I knew that it was possible to begin to come out the other side. And that's the beauty of the best kind of inner work that we can do is that there's really hope. There's hope to recover. And I say it this way, our most essential self that was always there, but it
Mhm.
got buried by whatever happened to us and we lost access to it. I always knew there was something more inside of me,
Mhm.
but I didn't know how to reach it. The only way that I did figure out to reach it when I was a kid was by writing. I started writing poetry when I was a very young teenager,
Oh.
and that was my one experience of making this connection, but it was very few and far between.
Mhm.
It wasn't something that happened all the time.
Right.
So, just long story short, and then we can go on from there to whatever you want to ask next. I realized that the whole world is filled with traumatized people who have been hurt by other people, whether it's in their home or their community or or their country or in a war or through poverty or discrimination or through assault, through having suffered through violence, and that so many of these people weren't getting any help, didn't have access to help, didn't know what was wrong with them, don't know why they're so disconnected from themselves or make some of the choices that they make that aren't good. And I felt like I really wanted to write about that because I didn't feel like that conversation was totally out there, that
Mhm.
that we're not alone. You feel alone when you're inside your own trauma, but we're anything but alone. And then the last big leap for me, which actually had me write the book America in Therapy,
Mhm.
is as a therapist and as obviously through my own experience, realizing that if you live in a dysfunctional family, if there's abuse in your life or neglect in your life or any kind of other trauma from other people, you're
Mhm.
going to be symptomatic. And we live in all these different family structures. It's not just the family of origin, it's the family of your immediate community or your school or where you work or your house of worship or your state or your government. And they all run on family dynamics. And it became really clear to me that many of the dynamics that our country runs on are not healthy and they hurt people like an abusive family hurts
Mhm.
people that are in the family. And so I felt like I wanted to take that lens of the microcosm and expand it out to the macrocosm so we could have an understanding of why violence and divisiveness and discrimination are so rampant in our society today and why so many people are hurting and don't know what to do.
Yeah, thank you first and foremost for sharing your story and your causes and your missions and your drives. I love all of that. Um, there's a couple of questions I have for you to kind of start unpacking some
Sure.
of this beautiful testament to you. You talked a lot about burying things down, right? We as humans bury things because of your traumatic experience. You bury things. Do you feel like burying emotions is like a universal thing that all people do the same exact way, or do people bury emotions differently?
I think we react to harm differently. I
Okay.
think, some people don't forget what happened to them the way I did. Many people remember, but their emotions are still out of control. They're
Mhm.
still being fueled by the unconscious beliefs and behavior patterns that we took on when we got hurt. So I might remember that I got hurt, but that doesn't necessarily mean I will on my own be able to just change how I react to a trigger or what my attractions are. Who am I attracted to?
Mhm.
We tend to repeat what we know. Not
Mhm.
everybody does, but
Mhm.
in some way, the repetition compulsion to just repeat what we know, to be attracted to the kind of people who hurt us in the first place,
Mhm.
um, in some way, it's not because we want that. It's not because people want that. It's because there's sort of an unconscious mechanism inside of us that's still trying to get love from the people that hurt us. And so
Mhm.
we get attracted to people that are similar in some ways. And again, it's not everyone, but it is very common.
Mhm.
Much of what brings people to therapy, I discovered over the years,
Mhm.
uh, is that they have been repeating what they know, and it's really not working.
Mhm.
And they're kind of like I was. They kind of just hit a bottom with it and they really want a way out. And they want to recover that sense of who they really are. And there is a sense in us that there's a who we really are in there.
Right.
We want access to desperately sometimes.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's so true that, yeah, I heard a study once that said that humans are the only living creature that can actually act contrary to their instinct.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
many of us have been taught to act contrary to our instincts, or we're taught not to trust our instincts. Because I think we're really born with, like any other animal, with an instinctual sense of who's safe and who's not, what's good for us and what's not, what's healthy and what's not.
Mhm.
But if you live in a family or a community or a country or a world that punishes you for listening to your instincts or denies your instincts and says you're crazy or you're wrong, you learn not to trust yourself. And that's one of the very sad legacies of being hurt by other human beings, and especially the people you depend on the most.
Yeah, and that means it speaks so much truth there, and that kind of it makes me think about this book, the America in Therapy you're talking about, right? This kind of the ideology of others is
Right.
what drives us to have um, these lapses in our judgment, these lapses in our like who we are as human beings. Do you, and I know we haven't gotten to it yet, but I'm kind of curious, do you feel like the ideologies of others is why there is a lot of racism and diversity and problems in America today?
Well, can you say just a little bit more what you mean by the ideology of others?
Yeah, it's like there are some people on this side who have a set of values and beliefs, right? And there are people on this side who have a different set of values and beliefs. And their whole goal, right, is the legacy of those values and beliefs.
Right.
So do you think like that is that kind of what America in Therapy talks about? Or I'm
Oh, yeah.
curious.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I talk about it from what I hope can be more widely understood as a, a point of view that does not take sides. Because the best psychotherapy and the best psychology isn't about taking sides. It's not about who's right and who's wrong. Certainly in the world of psychology, we have to sometimes call out that something is abusive or
Mhm.
hurtful or unhealthy or dysfunctional. But the purpose is not like you did a bad thing and you deserve blame and shame and punishment,
Mhm.
or you deserve to be beaten in some way, whether it's emotional or otherwise,
Yeah.
which is a lot of what politics is about, is somebody wins and somebody loses. Somebody has to shame and blame the other side for not agreeing with them,
Mhm.
and the other side's doing the same thing. But in the world of psychology, we really seek understanding. So how did you
Mhm.
come to get to the place where you feel like you're entitled to just scream at someone or hit them or not listen to them or see them as inferior or ostracize them? What happened to you that set you up to have those beliefs and attitudes and behaviors toward other people? And invariably, if people really are willing to do the work, they will find that there's something that set them up to treat people as other, whether it's, other belief system or other behavior system or other gender or whatever it is, and feel entitled to act out on them. And the world of psychology is all about healing relationship. So it's whether it's healing the relationship with myself and the parts of myself, which I can speak to, and I think I have,
Yeah.
was very critical of myself when I was younger. I
Hmm.
just thought I was a flawed human being,
Hmm.
and I still work with that critical voice inside my head.
Yeah.
It's there. I know more than that, but it's still there. Um, and then it's so easy to turn that critical voice on other people. So it's really our wounds that create the otherness. When people are loved, when they really feel like they belong and are wanted, when they're safe, when they're provided for, when they
Hmm.
feel valued, when other people are committed to being cooperative with them,
Hmm.
and when they're in an environment that has good boundaries. This is where I end and this is where you begin. And I understand that, and you
Yeah.
understand that. And where we have a commitment to nonviolence, no matter how deep the disagreement might go, that we're committed to not hurting one another. When people have that kind of environment, whether it's in their home or their community or their business or their country, they're mentally well and they don't tend to act out on other people. So they can tolerate that you disagree with me.
Hmm.
Okay. Can we sit down and talk? I'm willing to hear your point of view. I
Hmm.
hope you're willing to hear mine. I'm going to talk to you the way I hope you will talk to me. I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to do my best to listen to you the way I hope you will listen to me.
Yeah.
And let me just say, this is the hardest thing for us.
Yeah.
Everybody feels that they're right. Every single person, I think, on this
R-
planet thinks
Right.
they're right. And most of us haven't been taught how to listen. And not only not taught how to listen, but most of us haven't been taught that that's actually way more gratifying when you can repair a relationship with someone and get back on the same page or feel like you've made a compromise or you feel connected again. It's the best feeling in the world.
It
Slamming
is.
the door and walking away angry feels awful to everybody, whether they admit it or not.
I love that. There's something I want to comment you on and just, or not comment, but compliment. That's the word. I want to compliment you on, there was a statement you made a little while ago that you said that like there's this critical part of your brain that you still struggle with. And I personally feel like the ability to show up in a world that's so focused on perfectionism and to own that so shamelessly, especially on a podcast, as someone who's been a therapist for over 30 years, right? To have all of these credentials where you could have really easily spun that I'm great, I'm perfect, I got no issues, I've worked through them all, right? To humanize yourself, I think is such a beautiful aspect of who you are as a human. And I just really want to compliment you on your ability to do that, especially with a guy you don't even know, right? On a podcast. So thank you for your vulnerability as a human being, your strength in who you are, and your willingness to share some of the not the best parts about who you are as a
Right.
part of your humanity. I just think that's phenomenal, and
Well, thank you. And I really, really appreciate that. And I'll tell you, I wasn't like that when I was young. I
mhm,
felt so flawed that I just wanted to hide who I was all the time. I wanted to look like I had it together. And I
mhm,
think we live in a world that is asking us to look like we have it together all the time when
mhm,
most of us don't, in
right.
some way. And so for me, there was a lot of freedom in understanding what happened to me. It took me years, honestly,
Mhm,
to have any kind of comfort around saying I was abused as a child. It's
yeah,
still hard for me to say those words.
yeah,
Know why, but it's still hard. But now I know that it's just the truth. And it's the truth for so many of us. And I don't know if you ever read Carl Rogers, but he wrote some wonderful books. He was a therapist, and he had a technique of working with people that was just really reflecting back what they said, just really having people feel heard. And he said this really powerful thing that I've never forgotten. He said, "The truth is always your friend." And I really believe that.
100%.
And I would love to adopt that as a country. If we could face all of our truths as a country, not only the hurtful things that have happened to many people, but the hurtful things we've done, because we've all done hurtful things.
Yeah.
And it takes strength and courage to say, you know what, I was wrong. I'm sorry. And actually make amends by being different now. That's the best amends you can make to anybody, is change the way you treat them now. And I would love to just see that taken up by our country, and have us really be responsible for who we are. We're great in so many ways. We've done wonderful things. There are fabulous people that live in America, but there's fabulous people all over the world,
Right.
to celebrate.
It's true.
And we've done some horrendous things, and we still do to
Mhm.
many people. So could we acknowledge that? Could the vulnerability of just owning our humanity, which is really what it is, be celebrated? Because that's really a sign of mental health, I believe.
Yeah, I agree with you. And, I feel like to get to this point in your journey, Phyllis, to have all of these wonderful philosophical beliefs and ideologies and these truths, right? These truths that could really, truly change America, you've
Mhm.
had to gone through a heroine's journey, right? And some extreme trials. So I want to bring in my second question and kind of ask, like, what is one of these extreme trials, the heroine's journey that you had to experience?
Well, really it was what I went through when I guess I was in my mid 30s and
Mhm.
into well into my 40s in
Mhm.
particular, into my late 40s probably. I don't remember,
Okay.
but it was a long time. I went to many therapists. It took me a long time to remember. I had snippets of flashes of memory that came, starting in a hypnotherapy class that I was in graduate school. But I had memories before that. I just didn't know what they were.
Gotcha.
I just didn't know what they were really,
Yeah.
because one of the things that I learned actually in one of the workshops that I attended as a student was that traumatic memories are not stored in the brain the way a non-traumatic memory is. Or if,
Oh.
I remember walking downstairs and having breakfast, and what I ate for breakfast, that's stored in the hippocampus in my brain, and it's easily accessible, and there's not no trauma around it because nothing bad happened. Very traumatic memories tend to be stored in the amygdala, which is a different part of the brain.
Mhm.
And what I had learned in this one workshop actually changed my life. That those memories are not only stored in a different place in the brain, but they're often like shattered. So you might have a memory of something visual, but it has no feeling attached to it, and you don't know what it's about. Or you have a body sensation, but there's no visual that goes with it. Or you
Mhm.
remember a smell or a flash of something. Um, and that's part of how it gets buried, because it's not an entire memory. So
Mhm.
if you might remember a certain feeling, and for me, it was a lot of body feelings, very
Mhm.
uncomfortable body feelings, but I had no idea what they were about. So I tried to distance myself from my body because
Mhm.
it didn't feel good to be in
Mhm.
there,
Okay. Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So the dark night of the soul was really going down into the pain of the memories that I had. And let me tell you, it was hard. It was painful. But what I want to say, and to your audience too, as an encouragement, that as painful as it was at certain times, the drive to know the truth about myself was much stronger than anything that I went through. I never missed a session. I don't think I ever missed a session of therapy, because my drive to know and understand myself and free myself from the pain that I was in was stronger than anything that I went through. And I can say that I finally it's it, I don't want to say like I finally did it, because I think I'm in a growth and recovery process for the rest of my life. I think we all are. I don't think you arrive. I don't think it works that way. But I did throw off the blanket of that darkness, and I did make contact with what I call my essential self. And I really did make that contact. And 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 that was the most incredible thing in my life. And as a result of that, um, my attractions to people changed. I no
Hmm.
longer was attracted to people who were hurtful. And I had many. I had, as I said, my first marriage was very dysfunctional.
Mhm.
Um, but I had friends that kind of put me down, you know,
Mhm.
because I was used to being one down. And so I accepted that role. And as I went through my own healing journey, I eliminated those kinds of relationships. And I began to feel like I was an equal with other people, which I had never felt.
That's incredible. That's absolutely incredible. And I can imagine that, like, in order to make a lot of those changes, right, there was a lot of skills that you had to develop, right? So I'm curious about some of those skills that you developed and how they've evolved over time.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's a couple that come to mind right away.
Yeah.
When I first started therapy, and a lot of good therapeutic techniques take you back to the little girl or the little boy you were when you experienced whatever it is you need to heal from. I didn't want to go near that little girl in me. I didn't like her.
Okay.
And so but I knew that she was also my access to healing because
Mm,
she was the one who had sustained the hurt. So I had to like actually learn how to make room for that little girl self in me. And, I don't feel that way toward her anymore. I love her. And she's more or less more integrated, into my sense of myself. But in the beginning, I really had to learn how to make room for that because she just felt like a well of endless tears. And I didn't want them. They hurt.
yeah, it's not a fun experience.
Right. So
Yeah.
that's one. I think the other big one that I really love to share is that I think we all have a part of us, if we can access it, that knows what we need to heal.
Yes.
And, um, and I think one of the best ways to find that part of ourselves
Mm,
is to follow what you love. So
mm,
I loved to write when I was very young.
okay.
And I also like we would go to the ocean when I was a kid, and I loved the ocean. I loved water. I loved I loved nature.
Mhm.
And so, that was a source of great comfort for me, especially when I left the East Coast and went to the Midwest or the Southwest because I'm a desert person.
Mhm.
And I had miraculous experiences in nature where, very few and far between. But when I was very young, I really felt at home in the desert, and I felt like I connected to the earth in a very powerful way that was extremely healing for me and
Okay.
felt loved by the earth in a way that at that time, I was in my 20s, I didn't feel loved by people.
Mm,
So, some people find that with animals. I also found that in art. I started painting in watercolors a long time ago.
okay.
Loved it. Felt joy with painting, felt joy in nature, felt joy with writing. So there's healing that can happen outside the realm of our relationships, and I think, go for whatever calls to you. Maybe it's singing, maybe it's working with children. It can be anything. Maybe it's just cleaning your house and making it beautiful. It doesn't matter what it is, but I think
Mhm.
it's really important to follow what gives us some kind of joy and pleasure.
Yeah, I love that. And so a kind of a question that comes to mind with that, and I don't know your spiritual background, so I don't want to intrude, but do you feel like kind of getting into those peak states where you're pursuing your heart and you're finding those activities and interests, like it was the desert for you, right? Do you feel like those areas that you choose to get into can turn almost spiritual?
Oh, absolutely. And it really was for me. Um, and and I don't mind talking about that. It really, really was for me. Some of the experiences that I had in nature early on,
Mhm.
um, and even my experience of writing the first poem that I wrote felt like a visitation of a love that was bigger than human. It felt like, God's love or divine
Yeah.
love or the love of spirit. And there's nothing like that. And I've had a number of clients who through their journey
Mhm.
of, working with what conditioned them in a hurtful way, have found the same thing in their own way.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a prerequisite. I don't think it necessarily happens to everybody or that everybody wants that. But I think our psyche and our spirit are very intimately connected.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I think you called it your essential self, right? Was
Yeah.
that, do you
Mhm.
feel like your essential self was found and developed through these adventures into the desert for you?
I think we're born with it. I think we're actually born with that essential self. That
Okay.
would be the way I would say it.
Yeah.
But I think for many people, we lose contact with it early on, and some
Mm.
people don't. Some people have memories from early childhood of feeling very connected to the unseen world and to a
Mhm.
larger divine presence, and many people don't, or they've forgotten it. I think we have it. I think for me, and probably for many people, it was through the hard work of peeling back some of the layers of pain that made it available to me on a more consistent basis, if
I
that
love
makes
that.
sense.
Yeah, that makes total sense. That's recovery work to me. It's unveiling your heart, discovering who you are as a human person,
Right.
and discovering that highest self. That's kind of the word I use, but the essential self, that's
Yeah.
really cool. Like I love that because it's essential to have it, right? In order to live a fulfilled life, there's this essential part of you. So I really appreciate your word choice there.
Mm. And sometimes I call it my soul, but I don't
Mm.
think that that word speaks to everyone. So I use the word essential self because that also speaks to me, but also because it doesn't have a connotation of a specific religion.
I love that. Yeah, the term I use is my highest self.
Perfect. And I
Same
use
thing.
that too. I use that too.
Yeah, cool. So, Phyllis, looking back at like everything you've gone through, all of the amazing resilience you found, all the hard times and the trauma that you've been through as well, what can you appreciate about the entire journey that you've had so far?
Yeah, I mean, I really do appreciate the entire journey,
Mhm.
uh, because I think that there's a lot of energy that gets bound up in our traumas or our hurts or our very limiting beliefs about ourselves.
Mhm.
And as you kind of come through the worst of it, that energy becomes available. Like I have a lot of energy. I have a lot of life force. I have a lot of drive, and a lot of that is to give back, what I've gotten. So I don't, in this lifetime, I don't know that I would have the kind of um, resilience or compassion. And I'm not saying I'm not the savior of the world. I'm not a guru. I'm everything you just said. I'm an imperfect human being. I still have things that I struggle with or that I work on or that I try to do better in life. Um, but I feel like the energy that's available, the life force that's available through releasing some of that pain, makes it allows us to be our best self in the world, which I think, as I said, is an ongoing process of development. It's not, there's no arriving. We're
Mhm.
just on a journey here, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And and it makes me really appreciate what and to some extent I'll never really understand what people go through. I haven't lived through a war in this life, you
Mhm.
know. But when I hear about the wars that are going on and what people are suffering, it's heartbreaking and it makes me want to be of some kind of service. I saw a when my first two children were very, very young, we had just gotten a television. We didn't believe in having a television, so we finally got one. And I was watching the news one day, and my kids were playing on the floor. They were very young, and for some reason, they probably wouldn't show this now, but they
Mhm.
showed a videotape on the news of a journalist being murdered by some guerrilla, fighter in a
Oh,
foreign
wow.
country. And I my heart just broke open, and I sat down and just sobbed, and I prayed that I could be of service in this world.
Mhm.
And I think, going through my own heartache and seeing other people's heartache breaks us open to want to be better to our neighbor.
Yeah, and I believe that's why you got into the book, right? America in Therapy, right? From
Totally.
experiences like that. So I've got one more question for you, and then I want to talk all about your book.
Okay, great.
So yeah, and thank you for sharing that experience too. I can imagine that was a very profound experience that you had as a young girl watching, unfortunately, that execution. Um, right. So my final question for you is for those just getting into the realm of mental health, those just discovering, right, that they need to change. What advice do you have for those people?
Well, one of the first things I want to say is that we're all working with mental health. It's not somebody over there who has a mental health problem.
Mhm,
It's not like the most extremely symptomatic person that's the only person who has a mental health issue. I think we're all dealing with mental health. We're all dealing with how can we love ourselves better? How can we behave better in the world? How can we be more relatable? How can
mhm,
we be more generous and kind? And these are all mental health issues because the opposite is what we call a lack of mental health when people beat each other or scream at each other or hate each other or withhold resources from each other.
mhm,
We've been programmed in our country, and I think in many places around the world, to believe that those kinds of behaviors are based in our ideological differences,
mhm.
but they're not. Our ideological issues are used to justify those kinds of behaviors, but they're really mental health issues at their heart. If you saw a parent who was beating their child, you would say, "There's a mental health issue here.
Right,
What's wrong with this person that they're treating? They're harming their child's body."
right.
Uh, and we need to look at our country the same way.
Mhm,
It's a mental health issue. And as long as we keep believing it's an ideological issue, we're going to be fighting for, believing one side's going to believing they're good and the other side's evil, and the other side's going to be believing the same thing. And
mhm.
it's only going to produce war on whatever level.
Right. And we can
So,
see that's already starting to come about.
right. And so I think the place to start is in our own lives, and for people to know that to actually do that hard inner work of going back and being willing to face your own wounding and the wounding that you've created in your life, it takes courage, and it's
Yeah.
something to celebrate and to be, to feel good about, not feel shame about. And I think there's still this stigma that if you say you have depression or you say you have anxiety or you have addiction or you have some obsessive compulsive disorder or whatever you have, um, that there's shame about that. And a lot of it is actually societally induced,
Yeah.
just like it can be induced from your family.
Right. And yeah, it's true. And, I think one thing a lot of people don't realize that when they're in shame, most people that are causing them that shame also struggle with those same things.
Right.
Just don't know
And
how to
they're
deal with it.
projecting it onto somebody else. And I think that's one of the most important parts of really examining our mental health, not from I'm going to label you as something,
Mhm.
but to the extent that I haven't healed my own wounds, I'm going to project them onto somebody else.
Mm.
And that's what we're seeing all over the world, where people have deep shadow, darkness inside of themselves that is unowned and unprocessed. And so they point their finger at somebody else and say, that's the person who's really bad and awful
Mm.
and the cause of all your problems, and let's get rid of them.
Yeah, I love that. And again, perfect segue into your book here. So thank you for answering my big questions. And as we're talking about like all of this, I'm curious about the flow of your book and how the book plays
Yeah.
out because we've talked so much about society, societal ideologies, projecting their insecurities and so many things. Like what's your book about? Like how does it go about humanizing the experiences while also like personalizing it for every single person?
Yeah, I mean, and that actually is the point of the book, is to take our personal experience, our personal wounds, our personal triumphs, our personal strengths and gifts, and look at a country through the same lens, or look at a family through that lens and look at a country through that lens. So the flow of the book is really, um, I start off by talking to America. I'm like as if America was in my office, and I
Hmm.
just picture America as the Statue of Liberty. And so
Okay.
I'm speaking to her. But basically, the flow of the book is I share some of what I shared with you about where it came from, my
Hmm.
own experience, and how it led me to become a psychotherapist, and kind of how the lens expanded out from my own life and my family to community, state, government, and the world. Um, but I use a lot of, so I kind of, the whole first part of the book is really diagnostic. It's like, what are the dynamics in an abusive family? And
Hmm.
what are the effects on people? What are the symptoms people have when they're hurt by the people they depend on, whether it's their family of origin or they're people in a government position who are legislating things that are hurtful?
Hmm.
What happens to people? So I talk about some of those symptoms. I talk about, and I've mentioned many of them already,
Hmm.
depression, anxiety, fears, aggression, passivity, feeling helpless because you've been overpowered so many times, or feeling angry and aggressive and acting out the way some of the role models that you've experienced have acted out on you. Um, and then I talk about how in an abusive family dynamic, and as I say these things, think family and think country, think world, that then we blame people for their symptoms.
Hmm.
They're hurt and then they're blamed. So, I did some research for my book too. So
Hmm.
I have correlations between what happens in a family and what we see happening in the world with specific examples. And one of the things that I came across when I was writing my book is that way more than half of incarcerated people today in America are known to have unhealed child abuse issues, or
Interesting.
so no help for what happened to them. Then they become symptomatic, they act out, and then they're just punished by our society instead of looking, and I'm a really strong believer in this, who could we help heal? Whose life could we help turn around if we actually address the victim inside the perpetrator? And that's one of the big things that I talk about in the book, that there's a victim inside the perpetrators among us. And if we don't start to understand that, we actually can't break the cycle.
Hmm. I love
Um,
it.
and that doesn't mean that there are people, we don't know how to treat everybody. Somebody who's a mass murderer, we might have to incarcerate because we don't know anything else to make them safe to be in society.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that there isn't a really hurting little kid inside of them that could still be treated and helped.
Right.
Um, and I think there's many more people who are incarcerated today, for example, who could be rehabilitated and return to safety if they were helped. Um, so I talk about, those big principles, the dynamics of an abusive family, the effects on people, what
Hmm.
happens to people if they don't get any help. And the two big ones that we're seeing very rampant in our society and around the world today, regardless of what the specific symptoms are that people tend to either become hopeless and easily dominated, or they become the dominator.
Hmm.
And when you have a society in which you have more and more people who are easily controlled and more people who want to control, then you have what we're getting. And some of the people who are the aggressors and want to control run for office, and they have power over
Hmm.
untold numbers of people. And this is a mental health crisis in our country.
Yeah. I think the mental health crisis is so real. And I love that you're taking a stand against it, right? Because there are so many people that are scared of that. So congratulations on your courage, right?
Well, thank
To
you.
Yeah, of
Thank you.
course.
And you know what? It just needs to be said because
Yeah.
I really feel like those are the truths that will set us free and
I
really help us heal. So the whole second half of my book is about the healing. what does the world of psychology have to offer
Hmm.
that could really help us heal in our own lives and heal as groups of people, as countries, and as a humanity. And um, I talk about very specific skills that are basically based in, I have a whole chapter that's called, how to repair a relationship,
Hmm.
because we're going to have conflict. People are going to disagree, and
Right.
it's not a bad thing. No one of us has all the answers or all the most important points of view or
Right.
all the best ideas. So conflict and disagreement or alternate ideas are very much needed for our development and survival. One person has ideas about how to fix the economy or build a better computer or fix your car engine, or be a therapist or be a teacher. And no one person has all that. So we need that. We need a whole variety of ideas. When it comes to conflict, though, we tend to dig in our heels and want to be right. And so I talk about how to resolve conflict on that level in a whole chapter on repair. And the bottom line for that, for an individual, a community, a business, an organization, or a country and a government, is to take responsibility for ourselves and really stop pointing the finger and look and see how we're behaving. I'm still, my husband and I can still trigger each other. We still have our little tiffs. Um, and sometimes I look at myself, sometimes I have to come back and say, I'm sorry, I
Hmm.
was really upset and I shouldn't have blah, blah, whatever. We don't do anything horrible to each other,
Right.
but, and we always work it out. We're committed to coming back together. And I think that's the big thing. We can have our upsets, but we're committed to coming back together. But sometimes in the middle of a little upset, I'll think to myself, Phyllis, are you being responsible for yourself?
Mm.
Are you practicing what you preach? And I'll be doing that for the rest of my life. I
I
will.
love it.
Um, so I talk about repair in a very specific way because
Hmm.
we desperately need the tools for repairing our conflicts rather than fueling them.
Love
And
it.
that's a big one for the country and for us as individuals. And then I talk about some really big issues, which we probably don't have time to go into here today, but I talk about reworking our relationship to being dependent on one another,
Mm.
because we actually are really dependent on one another, probably more than any other time in human history.
I
We don't,
agree.
most of us don't grow our own food. We can't build our own cars. We can't create a computer. We don't know how to fix our bodies if we have an appendicitis. We depend on people all over the world for just about everything that we need to survive here. And yet we have this illusion that we're supposed to look independent and act independent and feel independent, whether it's, and we've also made that sexy. I don't need you. I don't
Hmm.
need anybody. I might want you, but I don't need you. How
Hmm.
many people have come to therapy and said, I don't want to feel needy? And I say, why? We all need each other. It's the bottom line. We do. We're wired for love and belonging on a neurological level. It's part of what keeps the species alive. And so I think we have to rework that whole relationship and embrace our dependence on one another and understand it as interdependence.
I
So
love
that's
it.
that's a big chapter. I talk about the relationship between competition and cooperation. I talk
Mhm.
about power issues and power struggles. I talk about equality. And the last three chapters are called the case for peace, the case for safety, and the case for love. Like I'm making the case for these things. Like this is what is going to have us actually not only survive, but thrive.
I love it. And I don't think I've got any more that I could actually contribute to this. It sounds like you've got it in the bag, and that book sounds completely phenomenal. So Phyllis, thank you so much for coming in and sharing your time, your education, your experience, your knowledge, your wisdom, everything with me and the audience today. This has been truly one of my favorite conversations, and it has been so beneficial. So for people who are just itching to get your book, where can they get it? Is it on Amazon? Is it?
It is. It's everywhere you buy books. It's on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and any of the major online booksellers. It just actually got launched at the beginning of July. So hopefully at some point soon, you'll be able to see it in a bookstore, but you can always order it online. You can go on my website, which is my name, www.phyllisleavitt.com, and you can order the book off of my website. You can contact me on my website. I'm happy to have a conversation with anybody. And I'm on all the social media. I have blogs on my website. I have interviews on my website. I'm on YouTube and LinkedIn and Facebook and, all the things. But probably my website's the easiest way to find me.
Absolutely. And we'll put the Amazon book
Right.
URL in the description, and we'll also put phyllisleavitt.com in the description as well. So for those people that are itching to get the book and want to have a great conversation like I just did with Miss Phyllis, you can just go there and check in the description. So everyone, thank you so much for tuning in to listen to yet another amazing and phenomenal story of resiliency with Phyllis Leavitt here today. We're so grateful for her time and everything that she was willing to share with us today as she was on the show. If you haven't already, please make sure to share this with somebody that you know could benefit from this beautiful conversation today. And if you're not a part of the tribe yourself, I invite you to hit the subscribe button or leave a 5-star review in the download or the follow button. Everyone, thank you so much for tuning in to the Wellness Center podcast. I want you to know that if you want to come on this show, understand that no story is too big, no name is too small. If you do have a story, I want to share it all. Please contact me. Chase at thewellnesscenter.life is my email. One more time, that's Chase at thewellnesscenter.life. If you're in the Utah area and want to know a little bit more about what I do on my day-to-day business, please visit www.thewellnesscenter.life, where we use red light therapy to recalibrate every single cell in your body, one session at a time. Thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you guys on the flip side. Peace out.